Enter if you dare this ghastly conversation of teens fraught with despair and recent lacerations. Final girl, chase after her, don't let her get away. But first, the Slumber Podcast Massacre with TNA.
Welcome to Slumber Podcast Massacre with TNA. That's Tim.
That's Andy.
And this is a podcast about horror. Every week, Tim and I get together. We talk about a different film from the horror genre, from your well-known classic down to that rare gem that needs to eat a walrus in order to grow new body parts at the back of your video store shelf.
That old chestnut.
This week, it's a very special episode. We're going to be covering 2 to 3 movies. And we'll get to those. Tim, I have one very obvious question to you. Would you like to introduce our guest?
I would. It is my honor and pleasure to introduce an actor who has appeared and starred in over 70 films, a nominee and winner of many and various acting awards, the star of such landmark films as Jeepers Creepers, Drag Me to Hell, and Tusk, a comedian, a thespian, a humanitarian, an actor who exudes believability, likability, as well as the ability to draw viewers in with every word. An actor with a presence so sincere that to watch his films is not just to see a great performance, but to feel as if you are reuniting with an old friend. Ladies and gentlemen, Justin Long.
Wow,
Justin Long.
Andy, that was so, what a night, man. I how do I live up to that now?
Hey, he's Tim. I'm Andy.
Oh, so well, immediately.
It's okay. You know, we do that reverse intro thing, and it's very confusing.
What's throwing me is the Andy Urschel is right under Tim.
Well, that's totally understandable.
And I'm like Ron Burgundy. I just read what I see. Go fuck yourself.
Perfect. Well, first, Justin, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, guys.
We're really excited to have you.
That was such a nice introduction. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think it's true though. I think you do have kind of this unique air about you, like because your first movie was Galaxy Quest, and even from that, like it felt like you'd been doing it a while, if you know what I mean. Like
it didn't feel that way, but that's I think what it was. That's nice of you to say, Andy. I was talking about this recently with another actor whose early movie was about they were playing a character that they were feeling at the time. They were just kind of living this life of I'm not articulating this probably. My point is I think I was kind of that kid. I was so eager. I was so excited to be. Oh man, I hadn't really been on a plane. I hadn't been to LA. There were all of these new things for me on Galaxy Quest that I was so wanting to please, I was so wanting to, and I was so afraid of the one thing that I didn't feel like I was a good actor. I didn't feel like I was certainly not accomplished at all, but I felt like I had this fear of being insincere or fake, I guess, was and so that was the one thing that kind of guided me. I felt like if I'm feeling it, I'm okay. If I'm feeling something, if something's truthful, I really relied on that. And my favorite actors were the ones I looked up to were like Sam Rockwell and Phil Hoffman, and those guys were all, there was something very truthful about them. And I just I guess I made a promise to myself to there's still moments where like I get caught, disconnect from a scene, or something distracts me. I have a hard time if I'm not really present. I can get distracted by things. Sometimes, like, this is going to sound so douchey, but like I notice it when there's crowd scenes and people are making noise. The background actors are like, I can hear whispering or something throws off the illusion. And I get really sensitive to that stuff. So I scream at them. Of course, I berate them. I'm always so self-conscious about how I communicate that. Because of course you don't want. There's a version where it's like, shut the fuck up.
Right.
but of course, I
You don't want
do
people
that.
walking away with bad stories about you.
No. God, I remember once. No, and you have to be careful and respectful of everyone. But I think that my point, I guess, is that I from Galaxy Quest on, Galaxy Quest, I remember really wanting to please and wanting to be present and real, and that was the only thing that kind of was guiding me. So it's nice to hear you say that. But the truth is, I was very afraid. It was all so new, and I did not feel at all like I belonged there.
Yeah,
know?
it probably helped playing a little like nervous, timid guy.
Oh, for sure. Oh no, Andy. Yeah, for sure. It was it lent itself to that. I mean, I remember even the audition. I remember the casting director had the first line, and rather, I had the first line, and I thought the casting director had the first line. I just hadn't looked at the it was the show. It was an audition that got me the audition for Galaxy Quest. It was for the show that later became Ed, but it was just for a really small. It was student number 2, I think, and I had like 3 lines in the pilot, and it was just supposed to be a one-off thing. And I was so I hadn't prepared because I did all this work on this audition for a show called Popular. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
And it was a callback, and so it was an exciting, like, and it was going to be on the WB, and it was to me, that was the one to really. I don't know what the lesson is, but don't prepare, maybe. But I wasn't really prepared, and I thought she had the first line, and so I kind of hesitated, and then I realized, in fact, I had to speak, and so I kind of turned it into a nervous, like, I'm so afraid to speak to this teacher, and as soon as I started talking, they must have thought it was a choice, because they all started laughing,
Right?
And I thought, oh shit, okay, I'll just lean into this, wherever this guy is. I'm nervous. I don't know the line. I'm just going to really lean into that. Again, I was watching a lot of Philip Seymour Hoffman, and he, especially in Boogie Nights, where he's twitching, and Chris Farley. I remember watching a lot of him. There was just such a natural, uncomfortable quality to them, and I felt so uncomfortable in life, and so I kind of just leaned into that with those early ones. That the difference with Jeepers Creepers was that it was I had to be more in control,
Yeah.
And that's why that was kind of a fun challenge.
Well, before, and we definitely want to get into that for sure. But what I'm really interested to know, Justin, is if we're talking horror here, your sort of your history, your timeline with horror, not even necessarily as the films that you've been associated with, but like your youth, your teen years, was horror a presence in your life? Are you a fan of the genre?
That's a good question. Not particularly. I've grown to be more so over the years.
Mm-hmm.
I guess kind of like Andy.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was not. It was when I was a kid. We weren't. You know what it was for me? I was obsessed with the video boxes. I remember like for the movie Gothic. I can recall like what the posters looked like, what that artwork looked like. Because we weren't allowed to watch R-rated movies until I was, a little bit older, and so it was just this like forbidden fruit. I just remember being so like, and that there were women and like bikini and like monster. I just remember being really into like, I remember seeing Critters for the first time and thinking, oh wow, it's surprisingly like cheeky and funny. Like it's
Right.
not, because the poster was like this like terrifying. The artwork was so scary, and you mentioned the Slumber Party, like some of those. I remember the posters for some of those movies, and of course, the Nightmare on Elm Street. They were beautiful, like, but really gruesome looking images that I was so intrigued by, but I couldn't. Probably because I couldn't watch them. I wasn't allowed to see them, and so your mind, you just imagine what could be in those, behind that box, what could be in that movie. It was funny. I was intrigued by them, but it was a very new genre to me. But the idea of it was always so exciting and kind of like, titillating.
And have you ever had an experience on a set? And I know that there's, for what the viewer sees within the frame is entirely different than your experience on the other side of the camera. But have you ever filmed within a set that was enclosed enough within the moment of the scene to where you've actually felt any genuine fear, aside from the work that you're doing as an actor to get yourself there? Have you
Yeah.
actually been scared on the set of a film?
That's a good question. And it's a question that often gets asked at the horror movie press junkets in a much less thoughtful way. It's usually like, so did you get scared making, and it's usually no, because you're aware of, the cameras and stuff. There was a scary moment on Jeepers Creepers where I was, it was also new to me, and for me, it was a big budget movie to be the lead of it, but it was an $8 million movie. And so there was a little bit of, I think they cut some corners, and sometimes that can be dangerous, and we were doing a stunt, I remember, where the creeper was going to jump over the car. We were gonna Gina says ram him, we're gonna, I don't know if she was driving or not. Yeah, no, she was driving, and she was going to ram into him, and they had the creeper stuntman on a pulley. They were going to like hoist him up as soon as we got close, and he was going to tiptoe over the car. And I remember right before we took off, the stunt driver said, it was already weird. See, if I had known better, I would have thought, well, why am I in this stunt? Why am I here? Because Gina's not there, so clearly you're not seeing us that clearly. And but I was just excited to do. I preferred doing anything I could, and so I didn't really question that. But I remember her saying, I could sense that she was a little nervous, and she said, the stunt driver, and she said, and she's like tensing up, getting ready to go, and I said, and she just goes, oh shit. And I said, what, oh shit, what's wrong? And she said, well, no, we're just supposed to be going 12 miles per hour. And I just realized the speedometer's broken. And we were driving one of those it was an old, what was it? Some old, I forget, the car was a beautiful old car.
Yeah,
but
what was the car?
speedometer wasn't working.
Like a Buick something?
Yeah.
Buick Skylark?
Maybe, yeah. It's a gorgeous classic car. Yeah.
They gave me a little, it's a beautiful, but not the most fun car to be in, because we shot in the middle of Florida in August, September. It was brutal. It was hot, really hot. And even at night, we shot a lot of nights on that. And this happened to be at night. And so I said, well, is that a problem? She said, well, we have to be going 12 miles an hour. And I said, well, should we get out? Should we say something? We have the walkie-talkie. And she goes, no, it'll be fine. And she started going. And I remember thinking, oh, we're going, it's definitely faster than 12 miles an hour. I know what 12, we had a street that you could only go 10 miles an hour on the speed limit. And I remember driving down there with my dad. He was always good about the speed limit. And it felt like you're going, it felt like you're in one of those like rascals at the supermarket.
Right, yeah.
I
could walk faster than this.
Yes, yeah. And we were cruising, and we hit with the poor guy. I forget his name. He's a great guy, stuntman. The harness broke in the air, and so he came crashing through my side of the windshield, and there was no stunt glass. There was no safety glass. And normally they would have, safety glass. So even if he were to hit make any kind of impact, it wouldn't shatter. But this shattered, and we stopped, of course, and everyone went running to the stuntman, and rightly so. He had cracked several ribs, and and I remember thinking, I'm sweating. I must have been nervous, or it was hot. I remember thinking, well, so it wasn't unusual, but my whole face felt wet, just like wet. And I thought, wow, I was really sweating. And the hair and makeup guy, they were great guys, Gunnar and Roger, such great guy. I miss those guys. They said they took me out of the car, and while everyone tended to the stuntman, and they said, Justin, sit down. They tried to calm me down, and that's when I knew something was wrong. When you can tell someone's trying to calm you down and you're not even nervous, you're not showing these signs as a compliment. So they started picking little bits of glass out of my face.
My God.
Really shattered. Yeah. It was pretty wild, but they but no scars, and Gina, who was more experienced than I, she was like, you gotta say something to your agents, or she wanted me to really, like, I don't know, she wanted me to say something, which I probably should have, because she she had a lot more, she was stronger than I was. And, but I didn't, you don't want to like rock the boat. You don't want to, it's my first big movie. I'm the lead of this movie. I didn't want to do that. And so I ended up going back to work on Monday, and the stuntman ended up being okay. But it was just, those are the types of things that you learn over the years you learn to not put yourself in situations like that.
Sure.
Like now, of course, I would be a lot more careful, and yeah, fortunately it wasn't that bad of an accident. But when I hear things like what happened to, on the set of that movie Rust, or, you hear these stories that have, that's when it becomes scary.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it was
the
end of John Landis's, well, not the end of his
Yes.
career, but that thing with Vic Morrow with his
Yeah.
death and the two kids on Twilight Zone. It's like there's no bad intent there. It's just trying to get the scene that you want to get. So nobody wants anybody to get hurt, but it's just kind of getting caught up in that moment of trying to get the scene that you want to get. I can imagine that it's easy to just sidestep some things just to get to what you want to get.
It is, especially with actors, young actors who don't really know and who are eager to be there. And yeah, I know that was unfortunate, but for the most part, but the crew was, it was a great crew. I just, I love that time. I don't know if I can do, regardless of my age, there was something about that experience that I look back on, and I think it requires a certain amount of naivete and innocence, and like a sense of an energy that I no longer possess. Not to say that I'm old and jaded, but I just loved every minute. I remember the crew, many of whom were from LA, complaining about being in the middle of nowhere. We were up in Ocala, and I just loved it. I loved driving around. There was one Blockbuster nearby. I'd go rent movie. I loved driving around in those desolate roads and seeing the Spanish moss, and I just loved I loved embrace. I remember before I did that movie, I was doing a play with Sam, with Rockwell, and he said, and he was so great about, he was having me run lines with him for his next movie, and it was that David Mamet movie.
Heist. Okay.
And and there's great, of course, it's David Mamet. It's great dialogue. It's stuff like, I want you to be. I don't want you to be as quiet as an ant pissing on cotton. I want you to be even quiet. I want you to be as quiet as an ant, not even thinking about pissing on cotton. Like crazy David Mamet lines. And
right.
And so I'm reading stuff with him, and he goes, "Well, what are you doing next? Let's read yours." And I told him, and I was a little embarrassed, because it was like, I remember thinking, oh, it's kind of a schlocky,
right,
teen horror movie, whatever. It's like brother and sister getting chased by a monster. And Sam to me was I respected him so much. I didn't want to read. And he goes, no. Like, and he sensed that I was kind of sheepish about it. And he gave me the best advice. He said, "Hey man, you got to treat this like it's fucking Hamlet. You got to treat this thing like it's Hamlet and really invest in it, and because he sensed that I was like," and it was great advice. I would say that to any young actor who may be, you have to, so I really embraced that dialogue that was difficult for me because it, and I remember saying to the director, I call her sis a lot, and sis, and kind of being resistant to some of the dialogue. And I just thought, well, this is the way this guy talks.
Right.
I'll kind of say whatever. I just wanted to invest in it. And I think had I been a little bit older, I would have maybe been a little bit more jaded about some of that dialogue. And
but interesting that you say that, because some of my favorite bits of yours in that film are silent. And I think where that movie really comes alive, and there's a very, very specific moment where you've come up out of the tunnel and you surprise the character of Trish, your sister, and you just go right up against the driver's side window.
Oh, yeah.
And you have this vacancy in your eyes, this sort of, I think they even call it like the 1,000-yard stare for like soldiers. Like you look so traumatized and shaken to your core, but at the same time vacant, and it's gripping, and there's not a word spoken.
That's really nice, Tim. It's so funny you mentioned that. Because I remember doing that so clearly, because it was the end of the day. He wanted to get magic hour. He wanted to get the light right. And again, this was my inexperience. I now am better at managing my time, if I'm going to prepare for like an emotional scene, whatever, I'll communicate more with the whoever's shooting it, with the director or with the camera guy. I'll have a better sense of when I'm actually going to be on camera. But I knew the scene was coming, and I wanted it again, like I wanted everything to be as real. I just wanted to be truthful, and so I was getting myself so worked up. I was listening to music and crying and thinking about things, and I kept coming over to check, are you ready? And the crew guy, they were like, we're setting up still. And I didn't realize that he was just waiting for the light to be right. And I remember just thinking, I remember just kind of torturing myself with being in this state of, and by the time we were ready to shoot, I was like exhausted from being too emotional. I just kind of I was spent. And I remember doing that and thinking, oh, I wasn't as like frenetic or like hyped up as I had gotten myself. And then when I saw what he had used, I thought, oh, he didn't even use, and looking back, I think that stuff was just too much. And to your point, this guy would have expended all of that energy. He would have had that experience down there, and he, like you said, he would have had nothing left. But I wish I could take credit for that. It was just a matter of like, it was almost like the director just waited me out till I was
very
I tired myself out with
Kubrickian.
over the top stuff. Yeah.
So with you had mentioned when you were describing the film to Sam Rockwell that it's a brother and sister thing. I thought that was, and it's probably just at the writing stage, but that was one of the better choices in just putting the project together at all, because it could have been, boyfriend, girlfriend or whatever. But the fact that it was brother and sister added a whole nother emotional element to it. How much time, or was it just kind of a lightning in the bottle thing that you connected with Gina as at least to us as viewers as clearly as you did?
Yeah, we got along immediately, but in a way that was the things that I think she found ridiculous about me, and the things I found kind of ridiculous about her, that wherever we diverged, we would kind of tease each other about. We would kind of like, I don't know why, I don't know how, I was sort of spoiled after that, because I just thought that's what all experiences were like with actresses. She was so immediately present with me, and was, like I said, more experienced. So she was really helpful when it came to standing up for myself, when it came to understanding being on camera more. That was a time in my life where I was like, I just done really theater, and so I remember having this sense of I'm just gonna be, I'm not gonna like the camera's not even there, and I'm just gonna be as real as possible. And she had a better understanding of the technical aspects that I was just kind of trying to ignore. That was always my like, which I don't think is benefits a performance like that. I think it helps to like have an understanding of what they're shooting, the mechanics of it, but personally, I just liked her so much. And like I said, I found some of her stuff because she had worked more as an actress and had been on her own longer. So she was older than me. So it was like, we kind of treated each other like siblings. I don't know how else to, it was funny. Like I remember one night, like we were staying in these little apartments, and she called me screaming like, there's a cockroach in my, I went over, it was like a scene from Annie Hall or something. I went over, but without the romance. I went over to like help her with this bug, and I was like, it's a bug, we had this natural sibling rapport. And for whatever reason, I was so comfortable with her, and she with me, I think right away. Like I remember thinking like, well, what if we don't get along, and what if, and Sam, funny enough, had been on, I think he had been on like a date with her, and so he was like he told me how cool she was, and that I remember saying that to her, like, oh, I know Sam. So that, like, I thought, that would break the ice, and that would make me because she was like a cool older actor, and I thought, well, if I mention another cool older actor and how I know them, that'll ingratiate me to her. I don't know, but we like really looked out for each other. I think we had an immediate sense of trust, and we did a thing where we stayed away from the guy playing the creeper, Jonathan Breck. We kind of went out of our way to avoid him, and he went out of his way to avoid us, and and we would get picked up together, and we just spent a lot of time together and running lines, and so that, I don't know, it bonded us, I suppose. And she really looked after me, in retrospect. She really treated me like an older sibling. I was thinking about that accident we got in with the stunt guy, and like I'm now, for the first time in a long time, thinking about how she really took care of me like a sibling.
Now, you mentioned having done some stage work prior to getting into films. For guys like Andy and I, who have really only done primarily stage stuff, can you, and I know that every project is going to be different, but can you tell us a little bit about the difference in the rehearsal process? Because obviously, that on stage you're getting 4, 5, 6 weeks of rehearsal. What would you say, if you had to pick an average, how many times are you really getting to run a scene, block a scene, run a scene for films? I mean, are the processes completely different than each other?
Yeah, well, it depends on the there's some directors who are more, they'll allow from a longer rehearsal process, but I've been doing smaller movies lately, and even on big budget ones, I remember, like, even on like Die Hard, it was they spent a lot of time setting up the shots, but we didn't really there's not that much rehearsal time. And I know a lot of movie actors who prefer not to rehearse. So, it's totally different. Theater is all about rehearsing. It's all about figuring it out so that you can then, as you guys know, get it on stage and kind of forget it all and live on and exist on that stage. And you just don't have that luxury with movies. Although it depends. I did a movie called Comet once where we rehearsed more like a play. It was written more like a play. And I did a Neil LaBute movie a year ago, and he's, of course, primarily known as a playwright. And I expected to have, and it was written like a play, this movie. And so I expected to have there's like a vampire twist to it, but for the most part, it's like one of his plays. And so I thought we would have time to rehearse, and we didn't, surprisingly. So I think it just depends on the budget and the director. And I love rehearsing. I love figuring stuff out, but you just don't have that luxury. So it means doing a lot of work at home, basically.
I read you got cast in Jeepers Creepers because you had, relatively unknown. It's essentially your second or third movie. But the director said that, you played being afraid better. Like, I guess my question is, like, what do you draw from for that?
Oh, well,
how do you make yourself more afraid than anyone else?
That's a good question. There's certain performances that I get. It's just stealing from people. There's certain performances that I love so much that were so indelible. I think about, like, Veronica Cartwright a lot. I loved her in Alien, obviously, but Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which is one of my favorite horror movies, that the Donald Sutherland one. She does fear. I remember thinking, God, it was just so visceral. There was something so real about Toni Collette in Hereditary. It's like there's certain performances that are that I just watched a lot. Leland Orser in Seven. There's some people who just physically inhabit fear in a way that felt more real, and so I just tried to watch a lot of those performances. Sigourney Weaver. It was really Veronica Cartwright was my favorite. Dee Wallace, there's some that are so, you look at some of those, even the schlocky 80s movies, sometimes they have great performances in them. And I think it's a matter for me, it has to be, I kind of need to get my whole body involved in it. I did a horror movie called Afterlife with Liam Neeson, and I was doing a lot of push-ups before our scene because I had to be frantic, and I think he's playing an undertaker who I think has kidnapped my girlfriend. I don't think she's dead. It's a whole, the stakes are really high for me, and so I felt like I needed to be panicked in this scene, and I was doing push-ups, and the PA who was there, Tommy, he said, and I loved Liam and we got along great, but apparently he looked at me doing the push-ups and he just goes, some actors need to do push-ups before a scene. It's like, I'm so glad you didn't tell me that while we were still working on it. Right. But I need to get really, again, it's my fear of not, I guess, being, I need to be as physical as possible, because that then leads to, that helps me with the illusion that I'm panicked for my life, I suppose.
Yeah.
That's what I like to do.
Now, and just one more thing, because I know we probably need to get onto another film, because there's several of yours that we absolutely love. But I have to know, in that final, the absolute final scene of Jeepers Creepers, is that your eye that looks through the eye hole? Well, I guess your eye head hole.
Obvious fake Justin Long skin.
I just had a flash of the makeup that day and like what was required of it, the hours in the makeup, and thinking, geez, I wonder if anyone will really know that these were my eyes.
I was hoping it was.
It would be cheap if it wasn't.
Yeah, no, that's great.
They like, what was the point?
Well, I know, and it would have just selfishly would have meant that all of those, although I loved wearing that out. I see, it's funny, like when the memory is not always the clearest thing. I remember thinking just how cool it was that I got to be dress up as a
did they do like, your whole head or just like one eye? Okay,
we shot two endings, or we shot that ending twice, and I'm kind of forgetting why. I think they wanted the shot. I think what ended up, there's an alternate ending where you kind of hear the music and there's I think it's a tracking shot, it's a Steadicam shot throughout the lair, and then I'm kind of like hunched over sewing like this, and I get up and move with the camera, and it finds me, and I think they just thought it was maybe too much. I don't know what the problem, but they wanted really just the eyes with the dead body, and so I put the whole costume on again, and it was quite a process. Brian Pinnicus is a great makeup guy, but it's a long process, and it was just for that shot, which I think is a really, I think it's a really cool shot. I just I'm happy you asked, because I can say yes, it was.
Yeah,
excellent. That's like one of the first things after we watched it, we were like, that had to be his eye, right? That had to be his eye.
That's funny.
So we I'm just so stoked to get into to Tusk.
Yeah, speaking of makeup chairs.
Yeah.
Long makeup. Yes.
So I have a quick question. So and I'm going to make this quick. As I was watching Tusk, the one thing that really jumped out at me was that it felt like a switch of what is a typical ratio of a film of comedy to drama, in that what we're used to is a full-length drama with little bits of comedy sprinkled in. This felt like a complete flip of that, where the majority, and I tried to take a cue from what I think Kevin was trying to tell us at the very beginning of the movie, because it begins with cackling laughter. That's the first sound in that movie is laughter. So I felt like maybe he's trying to tell us to enjoy this, to have fun with this. So, but what was unsettling in a good way is that it was primarily, and I think it's safe to say, with the exception of the majority of your scenes, primarily a comedy or black comedy. But the times and those little spots where we were hitting the drama were so affecting and so unsettling with you that it kind of made us feel bad to be laughing. And it kind of made me wonder, is this movie sort of like one big apology for laughing at people who are going through like misfortune, you know?
Oh,
And,
that's fun. Yeah. Yeah.
but I mean,
Huh.
like in a good way, because we all do that as funny people, comedians, whatever. That's how we get through
Yeah.
life, you know? And I just kind of wondered your approach to that film in particular, because everything
Mhm.
else that's going on around you in various scenes, there's, you know, obviously everything that Depp is doing is off the wall and hilarious. But when it comes to your stuff, it's so supremely just affecting and just difficult to watch as a viewer in the best way.
Mhm.
Did you treat the film as a drama from your
Mhm.
perspective?
Yeah, for sure. I think I kind of treat everything that way. I kind of go into every job like it's, you know, as real as possible, as dramatic, I guess, as possible. If the character is written in a funny way, and if they're funny enough situations, hopefully it'll be funny. And if I'm committed to the thing, so there's no real. I don't find a difference between an acting process with comedy or drama. But this one in particular, I remember saying to Kevin when I met with him about it. I'm trying to remember if I read it first or no, I read it first, and then I met at it. I went to his house. We talked about it, and the first draft I read, the thing that struck me the most was that there was an opportunity that was like kind of missing in that this guy was. I understand he was so unlikable, which he had to be, because to your point, you want to enjoy what's happening to him. It's somewhat, even if it's like in a twisted way, but I felt like there should be some kind of some humanity that I thought it might be a cool idea if he finds, this is going to sound very pretentious, if he finds his humanity only after becoming an animal.
Yes, absolutely.
Sense. You know,
that
so
totally
I like
comes
that
across.
idea. Oh, and I thought Kevin was into it, and so I thought that was a cool possibility to capture this guy. So in order to do that, there had to be the moment where there had to be something. You had to have seen him when he was different. You had to have seen him before he got corrupted by his ego and being a podcast or whatever it was. So you know, I don't know if we have enough of that. We have Genesis talks about, you know, you used to be this guy, but there was a scene that I don't know if we cut it or if we never shot it. I felt like that was important, that like there had to be some kind of redemption, a potential for him to be redeemed. But then to your other point, that it felt like there were a couple different tones, but the tone we committed to, Michael Parks and I, was definitely to play it straight. It was like this was if you do a movie like this, I remember thinking, if you are not totally committed to it, I mean, everyone, like Kurtzman, the makeup guy, Kevin, obviously, if you're not committed to telling the story in like as real a way as possible, it could be really embarrassing. I mean, like the embarrassing potential is so high. It could be like The Room, or I remember thinking like I remember being excited by it, like, and I think everyone who worked on it, there were a lot of people from Homeland. It was such a great crew in North Carolina, and so many of the guys, so many of the people I talked to on that crew were like, dude, we just kind of want it. We're like taking like lesser rates. We just kind of want to see if this is possible. We just want to be a part of this, to see like, it's like a great experiment. But of course, if you fail, it's like, you know, I remember seeing what Johnny did and thinking, it's so enjoyable. It's so fun and funny. And I've never seen a character like that. But to your point, I think it did feel like different tones, you know, like a tone, it felt a lot more comedic, that stuff. And I love Johnny. And by the way, I want to say he could not have been kinder to everyone. And
absolutely.
More respectful.
Andy's smiling because he knows how huge of a Johnny Depp fan that I am. Just
Oh,
massive.
he's the
And
best.
yeah, and
Yeah.
anybody that, I mean, obviously I don't know him personally, but you know, anybody that's even followed him through the years, I mean, fellow actors like yourself, have always said nothing but the kindest things about him. And his
he
gentle
was so
nature.
respectful to such a gentleman to everyone on set, and it was so cool with me. Took pictures of people. It was just one of those. It was special, and I think that's why Kevin just got really excited that he wanted to do it. He had him for 2 days, I think, and so he. And I'm not speaking out of turn. I know Kevin's talked about this. I think he just used all of his stuff, and it was fun. It was so fun.
That's what we were saying. We were like,
well,
there's like this extra scene, and I'm like, but if you've got Johnny Depp, you're just going to be like,
You should use
shoot
him.
as many
Yes.
scenes as you can.
Yes.
Now, speaking of great actors, and it was funny. I read that Kevin had originally was looking at Tarantino to play the role of Howard Howe, and that he got confused. Or no, to play the role of Guy. And then Quentin got confused and thought that he was being asked to play the role of Howard. So that he turned it down because he's like, no, I want to sit back and watch Michael Parks do his thing. Which is funny because that took me back to an interview with Quentin Tarantino where years and years and years ago, where he was saying that he thought that Michael Parks was one of the best living character actors that was out there. And I was like, who? And then then Kill Bill really came out.
Yeah.
The Kill Bill came out, and I'm like, who is this guy that just disappears into these roles? And I wanted to ask you, as a viewer, just sitting in the comfort of your own living room, watching Michael Parks is an intimidating experience. What's it like working with him?
It was equally intimidating in the beginning, the first couple of days, because we started on all of his. He has those stories that he tells, and Kevin wrote that great dialogue. I mean, I loved listening to it, which was my function for the first few scenes of that movie, where I just really had to listen to enjoy him. And I loved listening to those stories and the way Kevin wrote it. And Michael is, he never does anything. You never see him acting. He's just such a grounded presence, but he, when we work together, I'm trying to think of people. I'm sure Kevin's talked about this. He had a medical situation like 6 months earlier. I think he had a stroke. Something happened where he was struggling with his memory, and he was a really tough human being. He had gone through a lot in his life, Michael, and I think he didn't want to tell Kevin what had happened. I think he really wanted, because this was such a great part, and I don't know. I wonder if he knew that he was ailing, and these opportunities weren't going to come around much more, and so he took the role, he did the part, and but he was having trouble with his lines in the beginning, with all those lines. I mean, anyone would have trouble with the amount of lines Kevin gave him, but Michael was really struggling. And I think sometimes when actors, are having a difficult time with something that had come so naturally to them when they were younger, I've had this experience before with older actors where you can feel them, they don't always have the best response to it, Sure. And so he was a little prickly with me for the first couple of days. And I was getting a little nervous. I thought, I was so excited to do this with him and to have this experience with an actor I really admired. And I thought, oh shit, this is going to be tougher than I thought, because, just personally, he doesn't seem to be all that friendly, I guess is the best.
Right.
And,
sure. I know what you mean. Yeah.
And if you can hear me kind of tiptoeing, but on the day we started shooting, it completely changed one day. And it was the day that we did the scene where I wake up, I have to discover that my leg is missing, that he's cut my leg off. And it was a scene that I was really like, I've been thinking about a lot. I was nervous about, excited about, it was one of those scenes where like, you have to just go for it. And I have no frame of reference for that. Thankfully, I've never discovered a limb missing. And so I was like, I have to really embrace this. I'm drugged up. I'm like, it was a challenge. And And I started doing a thing in rehearsals. He started laughing. I started saying something like, what? And Kevin whispered in my ear, which is Kevin's genius as a director. He said, keep making him laugh. Keep like, and keep like lean into whatever you're doing to make him laugh. And it was me just kind of being out, whatever it was, I leaned into it. And I even would say like, why are you laughing at me? You know, like I used it in the scene, and he kept laughing, and he had this, and it was a real laugh. It was like, and I think he, and it made it like that much more sinister. It made it like really creepy. And that was a moment where I felt like a little bit of fear, only because it felt so real and sinister. And afterwards, I think he went outside to, I didn't smoke, but he was smoking a cigarette, and I went outside and he offered me one. And I said, yes, yes, I will. I love cigarettes. Yum. What brand is that? Oh, my favorite. And so I started smoking a cigarette with him, and he started talking to me and opened up about and we had a laugh. And then he told me about his life, and he really like was a different person. And from that day forward, he really took care of me. We got along really well. And it was a beautiful experience for me. It was like I could cry thinking about it, because it was like a once in a lifetime, you know, to get to work with somebody like that, and then to have that person kind of open up to you. And it was something I'll never forget. And Kevin told me later, he said to him that kid, what he did with that scene is he respected. I think he just saw something that he respected in what I did and what we did together. And I think he had been maybe a little hesitant to embrace me as an actor before that. So it meant that much more to me that he did let his guard down, because he respected what I was doing, I guess. So it was a huge moment for me, and one I'll never forget. And he couldn't have been lovelier after that. You know, he was just a really gentle. And then you see that a lot of that other stuff comes from fear and pain and insecurity. And I just so cherished that experience, because he told me stories that, like, you know, he was from a different era, and he was a cowboy. He was from a cowboy era, and he told me stories about Robert Mitchum and Bob Dylan and Faye Dunaway, and like these wild stories from the 60s and 70s that, like, you know, you never get to hear. And I just cherish that experience. And Kevin was I'm forever grateful to Kevin for that.
Well, and I think that really comes through on screen, even though obviously you're speaking to some very, you know, heartfelt connections there, but that's what makes that movie, especially as we get into like the kind of third act, so it's a lot to wrestle with as a viewer, because it's not just what you're going through. It's that we almost wish that your Stockholm syndrome will just kick in so that you can have some sort of peace.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And it makes me wonder, because now from a technical standpoint, there had to be like, you know, at that point in the film, it's like, okay, this is another scene with Justin yelling in the walrus suit. But at the same time, I'm guessing that it can't just be you just like randomly yelling, like in your mind, maybe you're just making these guttural sounds, but there has to be an intention as an actor.
No, I had dialogue that I was thinking. It wasn't written, but I gave myself dialogue for all of that, which you kind of have to do, because you're right. Otherwise, and maybe some people watch and think, well, he's just moaning or whatever, because that's what but there were times where I thought after a scene, is that another one of these scenes? Am I doing that again? But to differentiate, but you know, I just remembered a moment too similar to that Jeepers Creepers thing where Gina was taking care of me, where we were in a tub, you know, I was swimming, but I was in the suit, and that suit was a brilliant design, but it didn't offer a lot of mobility. You know, I was kind of at the mercy of whoever was carrying me, or like, and I remember Michael got really protective of me in that when I was in that suit, because I could have drowned. I mean, if someone let me go, I would have drowned. And so they were kind of in between takes. Nobody was really holding me. Michael was holding me up.
Oh, wow.
And he would say, check in with me. It was sweet. Fuck, man, it was sweet.
Yeah.
It was sweet. He would say, you okay? You check in with me. And yeah, it was a thing that only that's a very specific to actors who, that's just a memory of like being taken care of by somebody I really admired. That was really kind of him. He was a really sweet person, and but I remember him getting, hey guys, he's drowning here, and so it's ironic when I watch the movie that he's this. It's funny to see that he's this sinister. And yet he was really taking care of me as an actor.
Well, and you can see that in your, you talked about having some, even if it's not spoken, some of this dialogue that you have for yourself at like a goal of what you're trying to say with the walrus, vocalization. But where it's really coming through is I felt as a viewer that I could hear different thoughts coming from you just from the intensity in your eyes, like literally just in the look in your eyes. It's that I could pick up, okay, is he just pissed off? Is he sad? Is he so longing? Nice, and there's just such a small surface area to work with there, but it was coming through, and it was coming through differently in every scene. Wow. It was fantastic.
Man, well, I wish you had written every review for that movie.
Well, I got tortured by my first exposure to it was somebody saying, hey, check out this movie. And they literally just showed me the last like 4 minutes. And I'm like, why did you do that to me? It was terrible. No. Well, so it's so cruel.
But Tim, it's also one of those movies that people either really like or really hate. And sometimes they're confused about what it usually comes in this form when people will mention it to me. They'll say, "What the Tusk, dude? What the fuck? What the?" And I never know if it's a good thing or bad. I think if someone has that reaction, regardless, I guess it's a good thing. The critical reviews were mixed, but I remember thinking, that we worked really hard on it, and so whenever, even if somebody says, even if it's that, what the fuck was that? I take it weirdly as a compliment.
Right. Because it's something so different. And I think that like, while it's not, I wouldn't go so far at all as to say that it's surreal, but just with some of the films that have been coming out recently, I think we're sort of absorbing surreal filmmaking a little bit more now. Yeah. And which has been more popular in foreign film for a long time. But I think that people are more ready now for a Tusk than they were when it came out, even though it's not that long ago, but I think they would be more ready. Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Unfortunately, I doubt it'll ever get A24. Maybe A24 will do a reboot.
Right.
I don't think, I remember my mom called me halfway. She had left the theater because I told her not to go. I said, don't see it. She took my grandmother who was alive.
Oh my God.
My grandma was almost 100 at the time.
Wow.
She was 99. And I said, I told them both, do not go. And she was, horrified and said, I told Kevin this. So she goes, I don't want you. She said, I don't think you should ever work with that man again, let alone go near him.
I'm kind of curious because looking at your filmography, I was like, oh man, I did not realize how much stuff you did with Kevin Smith. Like everyone knows like directors and they're stable guys, but I don't think people are like, oh, Kevin Smith's stable, Justin Long. But then looking at it, I'm like, holy shit, like he's done a lot. Like how did that relationship start? Did you guys meet? Because I didn't really work out the timeline. Did you guys meet at Die Hard or did you know each other before that?
No, we met on Die Hard and Kevin worked like a week. A lot of our scenes were together. And that's one of those, there was a lot of waiting around on that set. It was kind of a slower pace set. So I spent a lot of time with him. We just spent a lot of time hanging out. We really hit it off. And then he called me like a year or two later to do it was a part in Zach and Mary. Just a couple days in Pittsburgh, he said, "You want to come?" And I was such a fan of his that I was so flattered, and I loved doing that part. And so then since then he just, we've been kind of playing together ever since, and I love hanging out. We go and smoke together, and he's just a fun person to be around. I've learned a lot about filmmaking from him. I think he whatever I think he liked me. You'll have to ask him, but we really hit it off, and I love that he lets me try things. He's the only director who really kind of lets me, like, I did a thing in Clerks 3, and I pitched him some ideas, and he was like, "What's that thing you used to do, sir, where you he had some, you used to do a Ted Levine impression." It made me laugh, and I said, "Oh yeah, and is she a great big fat person? Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I did do that." And he said, "Why don't you do that?" And I was like, "All right." So it's fun to play, and he is that, he has a great sense of play on set, and so I've loved that relationship, and and again, like doing something like Tusk, I just trusted him. I trusted that he would make something, and I think it's a beautifully shot movie too. God, a great DP did that. Oh my God, I'm blanking on his name, but he went on to do Moonlight and some really, I should know this.
James Laxton.
James Laxton. Yes. Yeah. James.
So
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, you were gonna say.
Well, I was gonna say I gotta wrap up pretty soon here because I gotta go. I got a thing. But
that's right. Yeah.
We didn't want to go before because no one's hotter right now than Sam Raimi, and we've covered on the show Drag Me to Hell already. You're not involved in a lot of the horror aspects, except for the very end.
Yeah, spoiler alert. Yeah,
where it's all right. We've already spoiled it.
Okay.
But what was like? How does Sam direct you in that moment? Because your character himself has been like the skeptic the whole time, and it's not until the last 3 minutes of the movie you all of a sudden have to turn that. And I mean, the movie literally ends with your crying face.
That was one. I was so excited about that, obviously, and was so like I would show up on set when I wasn't working sometimes just to watch, because I love Sam Raimi's stuff, and God, I whenever his movies are on, I have to stop and watch them, and I just wanted to see how he did some of that stuff. I wanted to see how he a lot of this stuff with a lot of his camera work. I just felt so innovative, and I loved being around him. He's also like a very gentle. Everything was sir. He referred to everyone as, in the same amount of respect that he gave to everyone, the grips, the PAs, whoever it was. And he would ask a lot of people's opinion. Sir, what do you think of this? And it'd be like a grip carrying some like, do you prefer this for maggots or these for maggots? I'm going to have them come out. He would ask people, which I loved. I was like, oh man, that's so cool that he's just so open and collaborative, and he described it to me once, because I asked him, like, well, what's the difference between doing this, and because he seems so excited, and occasionally he would talk about Spider-Man like like it was kind of more of a slog, like it was more of a more laborious, and I said, he didn't say that exactly, but it was just the tone in which he would talk about Spider-Man, and I said, well, you're doing this lower budget thing now, like what is the difference? And he likened it to, he said, it's kind of like the difference between conducting a symphony. Spider-Man was like, I would be carted around on a golf cart from one stage to another, and it was like a more orchestral. It was like a big symphony, and he said, and this is more of like conducting chamber music, sir. It's just, I know exactly it was just more intimate, and he said it felt like the sandbox, and I know a good friend of mine grew up with Sam, this actor, Doug Sills, really great actor, but they grew up together, and Ted, I ran into a couple of years ago. So, and Ted says the same things about Sam, that they all made movies together as kids, you know, like Bruce Campbell was in their movies. They were all like kids together making movies and playing. And that's, and you feel it when you're on one of his sets. He seems like a kid who's like playing, like the way he would react to some of the prop people would bring over, you know, the fake vomit, for example, or like, or the mud that they were going to use. And, oh yes, oh, that's creepy, you know, and he would have this like very childlike, it was infectious. It was great. And I think it's why Allison put herself through so much, because like she really went through the ringer on that movie. And
it might be the grossest movie I've ever seen. Like I just rewatched it and I'm like couldn't watch bits of it, even though I've seen it 3 or 4 times. I'm like, I don't want to watch like the corpse vomiting on her again.
Well, you know what's interesting, he said he likened it to Looney Tunes. He compared it to a Looney Tunes because he loves Looney Tunes, Sam. And he said that was his kind of homage to, I mean, even with the anvil and the pointy eyes, you know, like there's a lot of like direct Looney Tunes stuff. And but I think Allison went through all that because you just want to please him, and you want to match his enthusiasm. And it was, and so to your question, I'm sorry I'm dancing around it, but that final scene, I wanted to give everything to it. I wanted to and Sam will say like she's being dragged, you know, he describes what's happening in a very dramatic way, you know, and obviously it's green screen stuff, but he'll say like, oh, and then the demons are pulling her hair and they're ripping, and so he's talking me through it as it's happening. And so I just tried to put myself in as neutral and open and present a state as possible. And you know, I've imagined you know, whatever you do, whatever you can together, but Sam is part of it, is like you're just being like inspired by him always. He's always inspiring. So I can't wait to see what he does with Marvel. And we had talked about doing it as he wanted to do, maybe not it was a sequel to Drag Me to Hell, but we were talking about doing a horror comedy, like, because we both love those old 40s and 50s horror comedy, like Abbott and Costello, The Mummy and Frankenstein. And we loved the idea of doing a really graphic version of one of those.
Oh yeah.
I've read a pitch just on like a message board, but someone had pitched the idea of Save Me from Hell, and it's you then going to hell, kind of a Evil Dead-ish Army of Darkness, but you have to fight all the demons to save her.
It would have to be that, because Sam got asked about a sequel when it came out, and he's like, I don't know what else to do with it. He's like, it's kind of done, you know.
Oh, really? Well, maybe if he's listening, Sam,
friend of the show, friend of the show.
Friend of the show.
But I was going to ask you real quick, in that movie in particular, what I always say about you and your character in that film is that we don't deserve a Justin Long in that role, because that role, though, as it's written, it's not giving you room to use like your juice, like that enthusiasm, that comedy, that extra, that X factor that you bring to a role. It's just, it's very straight. So for you to actually give it which in the hands of a lesser actor would have just been kind of a write-off role, that you actually inject it with this sincerity, because you do really care for this girl, but you are really torn with the control of your parents. And you really felt that, like, even though you could take an easier path in life, that you were genuinely invested in this relationship. That really came through.
So nice of you. That is really kind of you, Tim, because it's not the most, it's not the flashiest part. It's the boyfriend. It's the guy who I would always describe it as like, I would say, now everything's gonna be okay. I'm just gonna be in the other room. If you need me, give me a call. And then all the fun Sam Raimi stuff happens, and I run back in at the end and I say, what happened? Are you okay? You know, but I would have, you know, I would have done anything to be to work with him. And you know, I remember getting my agents at the time said a version of that it's not the, you know, but I never thought twice about doing that. It was just to work with him.
And I apologize, I don't
Alison
remember her
Lohman.
name. Yes.
Yeah,
Her
Allison's
naivete,
so
or not, I don't want to say naivete, her innocence on screen is so palpable that it almost feels like you just dragged the nicest girl off the street and said, will you please be in our movie? Like she has
I know
that
she's
level of
true,
innocence.
like a purity.
Yeah.
Well, Allison, I was such a fan of. We almost did a movie called Dodge. It was about kind of like a Honey and Clyde, like a young lovers who like go on the run, they steal, but. And I just wanted to do it just to work with her. We had a great meeting about it. And again, I think Sam introduced Sam's the reason I've met everyone. Sam introduced us because they had just done Matchstick Men, and I thought she was so cute and so good in that movie. So when I heard it was going to be Allison, I was that much more excited to do it. I loved her and such a sweet person. She's actually become an acting teacher now. She's a really great acting coach.
Oh,
And
good.
So if you're listening to this and you're wanting to, she does online stuff. But man, was she good and such a trooper. She never complained. She did 2 weeks in that mud pit in that when she's coming out of
in the grave with the
she was in there for at least a week. I think it might have been 2, and all day on. And went through the ringer and never. I remember her saying, like, I think I might take a little time off.
Well deserved. Yeah, right.
Yes,
Still going.
Right.
All right. Well, Justin, we cannot thank you enough
Oh,
for
no, you
spending
guys
some
are
time
so-
with
this-
us, letting us pick your
Thank
brain
you.
about some movies that we love. I mean,
Yeah, and we could
Oh,
go
no,
on. We could go on for. I mean, hopefully, maybe
Yeah.
somewhere down the road, if we get a chance
Yeah.
to do
Well,
this
let's
again.
I'd love to have you
again, 'cause
back
I'm
to an
sorry about the
hour of
time.
impressions because I know you do impressions. I would.
I'll do it. I'll do it for an hour. Sadly, I will just keep going. But I have a movie coming out this summer that a horror movie that
Oh, sweet.
I'm so excited about. It was, and I'm gonna be like killed by the producer if I talk too much about it. But it's a 20th Century Fox. It's New Regency. It's this movie that Bill Skarsgård and Georgina Campbell. But the I just saw it and I haven't been this excited about a movie I've done in a long time. So I'm excited for you guys to see it because it's I think it's really going to be good. Jordan Peele apparently said it was his favorite movie horror he's seen in several years.
Whoa,
many
wow.
years. Jordan loves it.
Pretty high
and
praise.
So we got the Jordan Peele stamp of approval. And I'm so excited for people to see it. So maybe I can come back and talk about that specifically.
Oh,
We
we'd love
would
that.
love
Love
that.
that.
We would
That would
love
be
that.
great.
Yeah.
Seriously.
You guys
Yeah.
are so kind. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
All right.
you.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Well-
yeah, no. And this is, and just from a personal note, like this is going to do, we're just kind of getting up and started. We've got a dedicated fan base, but this is
Oh,
really
good.
going to
Yeah.
help us and we
Oh,
really
man.
appreciate it. But just being able to chat with you and get some of these questions answered and just to hear you, really dig into the stuff with as much, honesty as you did. We just really appreciate that. It was
Yeah.
awesome.
Oh man, I appreciate it, and I love horror fans are. No, I'm not pandering. They're the best. They're the most loyal, passionate. I am one. So I got to work with Greg Nicotero a couple of years ago, and I just freaked out on him, and he told me great stories, and he wanted story. I mean, I love talking about this shit with fellow horror nerds. So this was a treat. This was a fun way to spend an afternoon. So thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you
Awesome.
so much.
Well,
Well, yeah,
thank you
we'll
so much.
definitely, we'll definitely try and reach out to you again once we see that
Please.
film.
Yeah.
And that would be fantastic.
And then
Please.
check out our socials, the website, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
I will.
I can't do the whole thing. And
Okay.
then-
Yeah. Well, you gotta do it. It's part of it now. And
Yeah,
You
that's
gotta
true.
pour
That's true.
yourself out.
Yeah.
Right.
And then audience, join us next week when we cover, I think it's 1980. We're covering Sleepaway Camp, one of my favorites. So I'm excited for that.
Nice.
So
Yeah.
all right,
Oh, wait,
Justin.
Life is Short. I have a podcast called Life is Short. If your listeners
Yes.
want
Yes.
to check out, please listen.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thank you guys. And reach out about that. I'll check back in when it comes out and doing press and stuff. But you guys were so nice. I would love to come back on.
That's
Fantastic.
great.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Well, thanks,
All right.
Justin.
Best of luck with it.
All right.
Thank
Have a
you.
good one.
See
We'll
you
ya.
guys.
Thank
All right.
you.
Bye.
Thanks, Andy. Bye. Bye.
Bye.